absolute growth that we were expecting by 1.8%, whereas other regions, including Africa, will actually see overall a positive growth from the lower oil price. So all in all, for our industry, although I'm representing the Middle East, it should be better times. Unfortunately, when we then look at the market in Africa, and I've taken the West Africa and East Africa, and I should say that when we say head haul, it means actually this region to West Africa. And what we have seen, these are data fresh out of the books because they actually include March 2015. So the export to West Africa from this region, and I call it WCA, it's actually, in our books, it's from Jordan to Bangladesh. So it's that region into West Africa. And we have seen a 14.4% drop in cargo volumes moving into West Africa. And this is not just Maersk Line, this is the market. And that has actually, March was actually the worst of the 3 months, so it's not like we have seen an improvement. This is a market that has traditionally grown tremendously, but this year we are seeing a very different trend. The growth, or the lack of growth, is actually worst out of the UAE, where the market has dropped by a full 30% compared to last year at the same time. India is down 10% and Saudi about 5%. So a very, very severe development, which of course can be attributed to many things. The oil price is one, Ebola is another, elections in Nigeria are still having an impact, as well as the currencies, which are linked to a certain extent to the euro, and we are seeing a very weak euro and a weakening euro. So this is having a severe impact on the market. And when we ask, well, your industry and others, we don't really see an upturn in the near future. What we call the backhaul is the market from Africa, and that is seeing the opposite impact, and that is particular commodities like timber and cotton that is moving also into India. So there we have seen a 27% growth in the market. So in the times I've worked with the Middle East, this is probably the worst year. We have seen the worst start to a year on the West African sector. Of course, something that we hope with the growth in Africa in general and West Africa, that this will change again. The East Africa sector is the data are slightly less certain, but what we are seeing is a fairly good growth in the beginning of the year as well. We expect a full year growth around 5% from this area to East Africa, and it's relatively stable. The growth has been higher year to date, but it's driven mainly by Horn of Africa, so Sudan, Ethiopia, and less so by maybe the more southerly markets like Kenya and Tanzania. But we are seeing a growth, and we are expecting that trend to continue in 2015. On the backhaul, as we call it, back to the Middle East, because it's about a third of the volume. That's why we call it the backhaul. We can't fill ships with this cargo, but as you can see, it has seen a tremendous growth, and it is driven by mainly commodities out of Sudan. The Middle Eastern countries are importing a lot of hay, which fits very well in containers. So that has been a positive story this year, but obviously not the freight driver. So all in all, we are seeing two different pictures on West and East Africa to and from this region. So what does that lead to? And I hope we can maybe have part of that discussion. What does it take to stay relevant? And I'm not too concerned about the East Africa market, simply because it's the proximity. But I think one of the questions that I also discussed with David was, what does it take for UAE to stay relevant and Dubai? Because the West Africa market has always been a traditional strong point for the UAE. And today it is dropping significantly, and somehow when it moves up again, we need to get it back to the UAE. And what does it take? And what is it for UAE? What I think is important is, it has been discussed a lot, is the infrastructure. I think Dubai is very good, but I think it can become even better. And the second part I think we need to discuss is we need a deflationary mindset in Dubai, also in our industry. We really need to think cost in this. If Dubai has got to remain attractive for West African traders, less so than East African traders, we need to see efficiencies, we need to see costs in absolute terms per unit come down. That is, in my world, how the UAE needs to be effective. And then the second part is also about, we talk about e-commerce and visibility, and what does it take to stay relevant also for freight forwarders. And I know it's as a carrier here standing in this forum, but I need to say that the time of freight buyers only buying CY, to me, is also a thing of the past. More and more visibility will be there on the net to go and buy a container from A to B. And really, as an industry, both as a carrier but also as a freight forward, to be interesting both to a customer as well as to a carrier, you need to look at your product offering. So you need to do something more than just buy a cheap rate from a carrier. You need to be out there and have infrastructure in Africa. You can deliver a box to 30, 40, 50% that moves inland. You have the capabilities. You have the capabilities to cater for visitors. You have the capability of delivering clearance, etc. So these are some of the things that I need. So I think a discussion on Dubai, what does it take to stay relevant in terms of efficiency and attractiveness for business, and the same for freight forwarders, what will it take to stay relevant in an increasingly e-commerce market. That was kind of, I know I had very little time, so those were hopefully a couple of points to tee off for discussion. Thank you.
Before I open the floor for questions, I'd like to ask a few to kickstart the whole thing. Tushar, how do you see the going change in the business scenario in India? In which way can the participants here, the delegates here, somehow collaborate or involve themselves with changing India? What are the opportunities for people?
I think so. First, itself in the infrastructure, if you want to participate. Secondly, create a supply chain, which Anshuman was trying to put it up on a domestic. And there is going to be Indian e-commerce, which is going to take shape, going for export. And I think that's great opportunity. Most of us had network and part of network and all. My origins from Express, but I think so we can beat Express integrators if we create a seamless supply chain where technology plays a vital role, because primarily it is the transparency of your when the package is. That's what the Express company gives than what we. So if we have a technology, good network, connecting your pieces, the e-commerce, global e-commerce will give us a great value to play with it. So if you have a lot of money, infrastructure, if you are a small, medium-sized player, then you get participative in e-commerce, which is going to become the world e-commerce. And secondly, again, in Make in India program, 13 nuclear plant India is going to put it, which is world's largest nuclear plant. So your projects, heavy lift, power generation, a lot of machineries will come. So I think that's where we have to.
Thank you, Tushar. Babar, how do you see Pakistan as a gateway to the western part of China? How do you see this whole thing evolving?
Okay. You see, what's happening in China is a lot of industry is moving to the western region. I don't know how much everybody is aware of this, but after the biggest human migration that we saw when the Europeans moved into the US, the next large human migration was in China in the last 25 years, when we saw people move from the rural areas into the cities. And China's industrial empire developed over the last 25, 30 years. I think, and I can, that's what we feel, that the third largest human migration will probably be when China moves its population from the eastern regions into the west. There's a lot of pollution over there. They're having other problems. They want to balance it out. So they want to move a huge population to the west. If they do that, the logical answer for the gateways would be Pakistan. As you saw from my presentation, the areas is doable. So as I said, the president is there tomorrow in Pakistan, and there's a repeated visits are going on. They're already investing about $50 billion in infrastructure. And I think if those infrastructure projects come through, there'll be a lot of logistics, a lot of work for everybody to do. There are large projects coming in. There are nuclear, there are other the power plants. But a lot of projects are coming in. Road building, infrastructure. So there will be a lot of meat on the bones for the logistics industry over there. And of course, the logical distances and the areas provide opportunity for them to come right at the mouth of the Gulf. And it's into the Middle East as well as in Africa. But we feel that yes, it is there.
Thank you. Christian, a question for you. We have a lot of friends from Africa, and a lot of development is still taking place and continuing to take place in Dubai and this Middle East region. How do you see them participating and benefiting and doing things in this region for mutual prosperity?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think there's not a lot of companies from Africa in the region. It at least as I see it, it's more represented from this part of the world, traditionally moving into Africa. We have visitors coming in here and a few successful African businessmen, I would say, but by no means represented to the degree that their business will be in the future. So I think that could be one way at least to come more to the region and to establish. I know Indians have been very skilled at going to Africa early on also and set up business, but I think it's maybe also time to go the other way and have traditional African businesses perhaps coming to this part of the world, participating.
Thank you. So there's a huge opportunity for friends from Africa to do the reverse migration now. Thank you. Anshuman, how does the transition of go-downs to the logistics, new modern warehouses take place? And do you see any opportunities for global players and others to come in and further accelerate this process? And do you see a lot of business prospects for them also?
Very interesting question. Actually, if you look at it, as I said, 32 states and independent taxation systems, every company had to set up infrastructure in each of the states to do business. And every single company in the consumption space, whether it be FMCG or food or textiles or apparels or electronics, has to have a state presence in India to do business tax efficiently in India. Now, GST was a subject that is a unified goods and services tax across the country, which was supposed to have come into the country in 2008-9. And now that's been a subject which has been under discussion for a very, very long time. Coincidentally, our group is called Future Group, and we always looked at everything that is futuristic, and we saw that as an opportunity to get into that space, and hence we were creating a company. We always knew that the moment a unified goods and services tax regime comes in, the number of stock points will need to reduce. Today, every single company in the consumption space would have a minimum of 32 stock points. Some of them would have as many as 50 because some states are very, very large, but at least 32 stock points. Now, that's a very, very inventory inefficient way of doing business. That obviously can reduce to anywhere between 9 and 20, depending on what product categories you are in, once a unified goods and services tax regime comes in. However, the moment you reduce stock points, you need large warehouses which can do a large amount of throughput. Such warehouses were just not available in India. Even today, there are not many large logistics parks available in India. So what we had to do, and we being an entrepreneurial group and I being a co-founder, we went to every single state, tried to find people who had land banks, got into partnerships and joint ventures with them, and created large logistics parks. Not too much has been done because this requires a lot of entrepreneurial decision making. No company, no business side can actually give a commitment 2 years hence. No company generally does it. And no service provider can commit to a 500,000 square feet complex or a 1 million square feet of warehousing complex without having backup from business side. So that's a catch which has actually led to a slow progress of large logistics parks in India. But we being entrepreneurial, we took those calls, we built those logistics parks, we actually had to bear the cost of vacancies for 1 or 2 years till we filled it up. And putting in, when you build large warehouses, what happens is you have to put in a lot of automation, because in small godowns, the human brain, which is the brain management system as I call it, is able to do the work. People are able to remember where the goods are kept, even if the SKUs are high. However, in a large warehouse, you need WMS, you need G+8 racking systems, you need 3-tier or 5-tier mezzanine shelving systems, and then you need a lot of technology and conveying systems. When we studied the whole world, what we discovered was that automation, technology, software, everything is available off the shelf. The catch was, for example, if a sorter in the US costs $10 million, when you buy it in India, it will still cost $10 million. However, in the US, it pays back in 3 or 4 years because the worker cost per year is $35,000 a year. In India, the worker cost is 20 times lower. It is only $1,500 a year. Hence, a sorter of the same cost will not pay back in a lifetime. Forget 5 years. So we had to do a lot of indigenization and Indianization to create our man-machine models of the automation to make it work efficiently in India. And we have personally been very, very successful at doing it. Now, to your question, whether there's an opportunity for others to do it in India in the future, absolutely. Once GST comes into India, all the large supply chain players of the world have phenomenal opportunity to come and participate in the supply chain story. However, there's a catch. They will have to be entrepreneurial. If the large global multinationals treat India as a branch, and the branch CEO or country CEO does not have the power to sign a 500,000 square feet facility ahead of getting business commitments, then they cannot invest. So all large multinationals which are willing to bet on India and can empower the people in India to take the right decisions, I think they will do a phenomenal job. And we need a lot of players like this for modernization of supply chain in India to happen. On top of that, we integrated in future supply chain, we integrated with the express network. So a transportation time definite network will also be required once the inventory stock points reduce.